As you said, the American single malt is like an upcoming category emerging. How do you see it evolving, and how would you like to see Cedar Ridge's role in it?
Yeah, so as far as Cedar Ridge growing within it, I would like to get to the point where long term that becomes something that we're really well known for. I mentioned that about 80% of what we produce right now is bourbon,
Yep.
and I do want to stay true to bourbon because we're in Iowa, where it makes sense to make bourbon from Iowa corn. So I don't want to lose that, but I would like to get to the point 10, 20 years from now where it is a little bit more 50-50, half bourbon production, half single malt. And the main reasons being, one, I'm extremely passionate about single malt, and two, because we're a winery distillery combination, and I feel like our single malt ties in really well with our wine background. So I do have a very strong sweet spot for single malt, and I hope Cedar Ridge continues to develop within the category. As far as how the category itself is going to evolve, there are so many variables right now that make it hard to predict. One, we're working in a massively oversaturated market. I hope that every distiller in the world makes it through this. I think that would be fairly optimistic. I think it is quite likely that we go into a state of correction and a lot of distilleries end up going away over the next 20-ish years, just because it's going to be impossible to continue gaining market share at the rate that we were able to 20 years ago. There's just too many of us now. So that makes it a little bit harder to produce. But one thing I will talk about that I do think a lot about, I'd say about 3-4 years ago, I was of the mentality that the United States single malt scene will eventually replicate something very similar to Scotland, where the regions all have their different types of product. For instance, maybe the Pacific Northwest will produce a single malt made with a certain barley variety. Maybe, down in Texas, they'll use all new American oak casks. And maybe in the Midwest, it'll be all about unique finishing casks. Basically, maybe everyone will have their own style and things will regionalize. I no longer think that will be the case. And the reason being is because you have to look at how that would have developed in Scotland. And when Scotland really regionalized into different styles of whiskey production, access would have been a huge complicating factor, right? You only have access to what is locally provided around you. Fast forward to today, we have access to everything. For example, once or twice a year, we will produce whiskey made with peated malt. We don't peat it ourselves. We have to bring in peated grain, and we actually get that literally from Scotland. We buy the barley from Scotland and mash it and process it on site. So the amount of access that we have these days is going to prevent us from regionalizing into like certain traditional production methods. I think what is most likely to happen is 20 years from now, there are a few very prominent American single malt distilleries, and they have found their own thing to hang their hat on. Rather than they're doing their regional thing, they're just doing their own style. And so it does create some room for differentiation, but it's not going to be tied to region. It's going to be tied to each distillery's own preferences and historical roots.
Okay, that makes sense.
Thanks for watching this video. You can watch the full podcast episode by clicking here, or watch another interesting video by clicking here. Let's continue the discussion in the comment section and see you in the next one.